Casey. Thank you, Green Apple. I am so stoked to be here and it's excited to celebrate the launch of Chinatown Pretty by Andrea Lowe and Valerie Luu. You may have first encountered Chinatown Pretty on Instagram, like I did. And Andrea and Valerie have been interviewing and photographing Chinatown's most fashionable seniors. I have to give a shout out to the back. I was saying to these ladies earlier that I think the back cover does not get enough play. So front, back. They've been interviewing and photographing seniors in Chinatowns across North America since 2014. And now you can enjoy it in this tangible book form. Chinatown Pretty is published by Chronicle Books and features these amazing portraits and life stories and advice from people in 6 different Chinatowns in North America. And Valerie and Andrea are zooming in from Mr. Jew's in San Francisco Chinatown, and I'm super jealous because I wish we could all be together and enjoying this time and this launch and celebrating. But cheers to you guys, and hi Valerie, hi Andrea.
Hi,
Hey,
thank you for
Bonnie.
being here.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
I think we're going to start off with a reading from the San Francisco section of the book. And I love the title of this spread because it's called My Favorite Salad is Wine. But I want to invite all of you again to submit questions in the Q&A box throughout our hour together, and I'll keep an eye on them throughout, and we'll try to get to them by the end of this hour. But Valerie and Andrea have a treat for you.
Awesome. Okay. I think, let's see. Casey, is it possible to do allow screen sharing for us?
And while we're waiting for that, we're just so excited to be hosted tonight by Green Apple Books. You know, one of my favorite bookstores. I found a lot of my favorite books here, and yeah, it's a wild kind of like dream come true.
All right, I enabled screen sharing. Is it working for you?
Perfect.
Okay, great.
Okay. How's that coming through, Bonnie?
Great.
Okay, awesome. I'm just setting the tone, or setting the stage for this evening. This photo is actually taken in Portsmouth Square, which was, and we're actually located just steps away from where a lot of the portraits, a lot of the interviews took place. And let's see. Yeah, so we can go back to some of the visuals, but we wanted to start off this evening with a reading from the San Francisco chapter of the book. And San Francisco is where we began the project, so it's definitely has a special place.
And this is our first San Francisco bookstore talk, so it feels like a big deal, just like we finally arrived at home.
Yeah.
And one of the key things when we do Chinatown Pretty is we always check the socks, and the story will kind of exemplify that.
Right. So I'm reading from this. This story is entitled "My Favorite Salad is Wine." A Chinatown Pretty outfit is like a short story. There's a narrative, there are themes and references. And once you read through the whole outfit, you'll be delighted, amused, or inspired. Maybe even all at once. That's what happened when we met this woman while we were installing our first gallery show at 41 Ross, an art and community space in Chinatown. We like how certain elements show up several times in her outfit, like jade jewelry, knitwear, fleece, and multiple pops of pink, like her socks.
Another time we ran into her at Ross Alley wearing a powerful outdoor pajama set with bold pink florals and mustard yellow buttons. This time, another surprise. She was sporting a pink froggy pinky ring, minds blown and hearts exploded again. The story of a Chinatown Pretty outfit sometimes leads to a punchline. In this case, the kicker was a pair of pink socks that read, "My favorite salad is wine."
So actually on both occasions, when we ran into her, she was wearing the same socks. So we lifted up, we had to check the second time we encountered her, and we kind of freaked out because she had her favorite, "My favorite salad is wine."
You're like, it's her. It's
Yeah.
the salad wine lady.
Her, confirmed. And yeah, Ross Alley, where we took this picture and met her. Actually, we have a BTS here, which is like the moment that probably these photos were taken, is a really magical place. It's just a place, it's a narrow alley in Chinatown, and there's all these magical encounters because you kind of have to walk closer to people. It's pretty much pedestrian only, and it's lined with different shops, barbers.
Like the iconic Fortune Cookie Factory, the Golden Gate Fortune Cookie Factory.
I love that place so much. They're the they do all of the hand, for the people who aren't familiar with it, with the Golden Gate Fortune Cookie Factory, is that it's they hand fold all of the cookies the way that they did in the past. And my grandfather actually was one of those. He did that in New York's Chinatown for like all of my childhood, and that was his job, was to like fold the cookies before they hardened, the dough. And he always had his fingers bandaged, and we would get all the reject cookies when we were growing up. And I remember when I was researching American Chinatown, my mom and I went to the Fortune Cookie Factory in Ross Alley, and my mom was talking with the owners and saying, like, talking about my gong having done that, and they do it in the same way, those like plates that kind of go around. It's a really amazing place. And you can still buy them, and you can get customized cookies, so I'm just giving a shout out to them, as if you need any custom cookies, go there.
Yeah, my new party trick is to get the extra large one. It's
Yes.
Yeah. And then you can write your own fortune.
We actually did one of our book talks. We actually were live from the Golden Gate Fortune Cookie Factory. So so that was awesome. After hours, we went there, and we got to meet with the owner and his mom, who's like immortalized on this mural inside of there. So that was really special that they allowed us in.
It's just, I love that you're in Chinatown now for this event. Still, by hook or by crook, we're doing it. So I love this book so much, not only because it's beautiful and delightful and full of all these colorful characters, but it was exactly what you said in this excerpt, which is short stories, or these short human histories that are compressed into these outfits. And that you, in this project, you kind of, in this sideways kind of way, ask each person behind the outfit to unspool that history, right? And what I always come back to is like, that's such a wonderful and generous invitation, if you think about it. And I wondered if you explicitly set out to do that when you started this project.
Yeah, I think when we first started out, it was because Andrea and I would spend time eating dim sum in Chinatown, and we would both get this like really strong reaction to the grandmas that we saw on the street. Like, oh my God, did you see what she was wearing? Did you see how big her hat was? Oh my God, you see all those florals? So it kind of began with a curiosity as to where they got their shoes or how they composed this outfit. And then from there, we got to learn more about their immigration stories and then their daily lives. And, because they've lived such long, diverse lives, we wanted to know, like, what's the secret to a healthy life or a happy life.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's kind of this rule number one of a good interview, right? It's like you ask someone to tell you something about themselves that no one ever asks. And I wondered if people were always willing to talk, or how you dealt with subjects who didn't want to talk.
Yeah. That kind of ties into how we approach people on the street. So like you're saying, it's a great conversation starter to ask them about something they might not get asked about often. For us, that's a really interesting article of clothing, something that we're drawn to. So maybe it's like a hat that looks handmade. It might be just this rad, bright jacket. A lot of these outfits really invite you to kind of ask these questions because there's so much story that you can see behind it, or history. So that's how we start our conversation. And we have to say, overall, the rejection rate for approaching people on the street to talk with them and then eventually take their portrait is probably about 90%. So we've made endless laps around Chinatown, just to get maybe one person to stop and really oblige us.
Yeah, I think we're lucky we get one in like a 3-hour span, which is usually how long we go for.
And there's different success rates in different cities, so.
Yeah. How did you, what was the sort of like highest hit rate versus the lowest? Which cities?
Vancouver really showed up and surprised us. So the inverse was true. Like, it was 90% success rate in Vancouver.
Chicago was also, Chicago was a surprise too. We met, I would say at least 75% of the people that we stopped and talked to allowed us to take a photo. So in a way, it's like kind of those tropes of like, oh, nice, sweet people in the Midwest and those friendly Canadians. In a way, we found that to be true. And in New York City, that was definitely the trickiest place.
I think New York's
the project.
the toughest.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah.
But what we find too is like some people will tell you their life story. We'll be standing there in the street corner 15 minutes and hear all these details about their lives, the trials and tribulations. And then we'll be like, and so we're doing this project, can we take your photo? And they're like, nope, that's it. And they're like, they bounce.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they will let us take a picture. They're like, yeah, sure, whatever. But, then get on the bus and we don't have time for the life story. So it's
we got one piece and not the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, the project's pretty ephemeral in that way because, sometimes they're in a rush. And other times, if we can get their contact info, we'll try to follow up and make a house visit and have more time to sit down and talk with them. But it tends to be the minority. But in the book, you'll see we have some profiles that are multiple pages long, and you see that they have different clothes at different times because either we ran into them multiple times or we formed a relationship where we would go visit.
Yeah, I love that there was this range of that shorter stories, and maybe you didn't really know that much about them because they were just like they would say maybe one really enigmatic and compelling thing to you, and then be like, well, I gotta go. But you got the picture and you got like something that kind of pulls you in, and then you have the ones that sort of again like unspool in this really lovely way where you get the depth, and I really like the rhythm of that through the book. I know I've told you this, but I have to admit that this book especially hit home for me right now because my grandmother, my mother's mom, my papa, she died just a month and a half ago, and that was a week shy of her 95th birthday. And she came to New York's Chinatown in 1960, and she lived in Madison Street and in this 3-room apartment with 3 of her kids and her husband. And she worked as a seamstress in a garment factory for decades. And so my earliest memories are of her like running the sewing machine, and we would go in for family visits and she would be like making something, and she would often be making something for us to wear or for herself or for my, she made my mom's wedding dress, that was like this thing that I hung in my closet for my whole childhood. And when I was in 5th grade, I finally understood that I would never wear it because I outgrew my mom in 5th grade. She's 4'11", but I looked through all these pictures of us, my brother and I, when we were kids, and there are reasons why I've dug out this old picture where we look like old people because my grandmother dressed us. She made clothes for us, and so I just love that. And in honor of this tonight, I was like, I need to have some strong patterns. I need to have some color because there is like a certain kind of aesthetic that I just love, and it kind of inspired me to kind of go back into that. And one of the things I realized was that over time that clothing and making the clothing, but also wearing the clothing and taking great pride in the clothing was one of the ways my grandmother showed her love, not just for everyone around her, but for herself. She was like super well dressed. She was impeccably like took such great pride in like dressing up, and she was so poor when she arrived in this country, and then she was able to to be able to take her sewing machine and spin basically our family's life out of it was like this huge point of pride. And I kept thinking about this as I was reading this book and looking at all the pictures and hearing the little stories behind all these details. And I could not help notice, of course, that a lot of the subjects, they would say like they had like vintage garments that were like decades and decades and decades old, but look like they're brand new, right? So it's like about this care, immaculate, like the frugality and the thrift and all of that. And that is a tremendous source of pride. And then I kind of wondered if you could talk about that a little bit, the role of clothing in these subjects' lives and the meaning that you could sort of unpack in these conversations that you had about clothes. Because on the one hand, it's like, oh, like you're like popo, like you're just like flattering them, and they're of course they love the attention and they love that you notice that about them, but also that it's an invitation to kind of talk about how they present themselves and how much pride they take in their appearance even now.
Yeah. Well, I'm so sorry to hear about your grandma, and I loved hearing about your own personal history and connection um, with with Chinatown and how the book brought up those memories. I think that's definitely something we aim to. It's definitely a mission of this project and the feedback that we've been getting. Yeah, we've learned a lot about, I guess, what cultural values are represented in these clothes. And like you were saying, a lot of it is this frugality, utilitarian. They're very functional in how they dress. There's the thriftiness and just resourcefulness. There's a lot of repurposing, reusing, handmade customization. And these are the kind of details that we started to notice once we met more and more seniors. And what emerged is sort of this, I guess, sort of a patchwork of what we have, I don't know, what I define as these cultural values from that generation. And yeah, for example, let's see if we have any visual examples. Like my favorite salad is wine. For example, if you look really closely, she's, I bet she made this vest herself, but there are kind of mismatched buttons on it, and there's a safety pin, and just those really beautiful details of.
You see the tender care.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my grandma, my step-grandmother who lived in Burnaby, which is near Vancouver, she exemplified that. She, had clothes that she had tailor-made in Hong Kong for like 30 years that looked brand new. And when she passed away last February, like I got to inherit a lot of her clothes, and it continues on with me because they're well-made and they're beautiful and they're unique. Whereas like I'll get a Uniqlo jacket and I'm just like waiting for it to get dirty. I'm like, when am I gonna mess this up? Like I'm just not as careful. So I think meeting a lot of the seniors has taught me like about slow fashion and about how to buy something that you care about or make something that you care about. And their stuff looks like not even a day old.
Yeah. Some of that might have to do with that. They use a lot of polyester. I think that was definitely present in my grandma's wardrobe. And my grandma was also a seamstress and made all of her clothes and hand knit many a sweater for me and my sister as well. And so, yeah, I think.
So always check the socks and always wear polyester.
They'll look new for decades.
Polyester will last forever. It will outlive us all. What were some of the more surprising things you learned? I mean, what did people tell you? Like, do specific stories stand out in your mind as like, I cannot believe that they, told us that, or that it seemed maybe that they were things that they had never told anyone else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think one of the things I love most about this project is the serendipity. It's just like really turning a corner and running into people. Like Helen Lowe, who is in the second photo with the kind of blue glasses. Andrew, you want to talk about how you met her?
Oh yeah, we were in Vancouver. This photo was in Vancouver, Chinatown, and we had split up to kind of just soak in Chinatown on our own. And I was taking some sort of details and some scene shots, and I was like so absorbed shooting this apothecary that you can see behind her, and then I just looked up. And I got like really flustered because I was like, wow, she's like a star. I really want to meet her. And I was able to like basically distract her until Valerie could come. And I think I called you. So I was like, come over quick, and that's actually as part of her story is kind of reveals a bit about how we met her. But it just happened, and Valerie came and she obliged a photo, but we were unable to contact her the rest of the week we were there. We were hoping to go visit her and just really get more of her backstory, but it was just such a fleeting thing, and we weren't able to get a hold of her by phone.
Yeah, I think what the surprise was with that was like, she was like, I'm 90 something and I don't go out as much, but my doctor was like, you need to go out. And so we caught her on her weekly walk.
Yeah. I think
The one time she goes outside.
Yeah, I think what's beautiful of this project is that we're just catching people and we have these little moments.
Yeah.
There was another gentleman in LA who told us a bit more about being imprisoned. And that was a really long story, but just like the politics of China at that time and being jailed and his family not knowing where he was. Yeah, this guy right here. I mean, he looks like pretty, I don't know if you can see this, but he looks, pretty happy, pretty chill, but
Yeah.
it's a really long story that captures,
Right.
part of Chinese history.
Yeah, I mean, this book is such a good reminder to like all of us, like ask your elders questions, and I think about how it's often so much easier to ask, these kinds of questions of perfect strangers than it is to ask questions of someone you know well, right? So like we all would love to know more about our grandparents and even our parents, just like, things, their secret histories, and we don't really think to ask them unless we have a reason to do so. And then, oftentimes it's too late. But I think like to, to do that, like I said before, is like, it really is such an act of generosity. And I think especially when people get older, they have all of these memories that live actually really vividly in their minds, and they can talk about them as if they happened yesterday. I think that's such an amazing thing. And I wondered if, like, did it motivate you to investigate your own family histories in the same way? Like when you're hearing these stories just like pour out of people, or like these little intriguing details. Tell me about, how that kind of influenced how you looked at your own families.
I mean, definitely, we worked on this project for 6 years, and partway through I was like, I am the first Vietnamese American to be born here. My whole family's from Vietnam. They were refugees, and there's a wealth of stories, and I'm the first one here. So I feel a responsibility now to be the one that records it, to learn more about it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I definitely spend time with my grandma. We lay in bed together and I'm like typing. I'm like, let's start from the beginning. Like, when were you born? Did you have pets? Like, who was your first crush?
Oh,
Yeah.
is she reluctant to tell you things, or is she pretty open about
She's
things?
pretty open about things.
Yeah.
And I find that the relationship between, a grandparent and a grandkid for sure, like, is different from if I think about if I asked well, it's changing now, like it sort of evolves. I actually think about when I interviewed my grandmother for American Chinatown, she had all these things to say, and she was like, it was like a dam had burst, right? And then I was thinking, it invited everyone else in my family to share those stories too, but not necessarily would I hear those stories from my mom. It's like you sort of have like a certain rhythm you fall into with your closest family members, and then I don't know what it is. Like, I think you just sort of either forget, or it seems like a lot
Yeah.
of trouble to ask them.
It's a big question. It's a big question. And I don't know if you encounter this with your family, Bonnie, but I think, well, in general, I feel that Chinese culture is pretty private, which kind of adds a layer to make this project a little harder, just approaching people on the street. But I think my family, they're pretty private, but also they just don't realize, like, if they don't tell me their stories, I just won't know it. Like, they kind of take for granted that maybe of what they know, but I find that when I do ask my family and my parents, they're kind of like, oh, that one time, like, I went to this tuberculosis camp when I was 14, and I was just like, what? All these stories, they kind of just like, they say it so matter-of-factly, even sort of what I consider to be like major hardships and adversity about, like, my grandma coming over on a boat and like leaving family behind and whatnot, or uncles being separated when they're young, and they kind of just speak about it like it's normal. And I think it really was pretty, these are typical stories for that generation.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I could not imagine going through some of these things.
Yeah.
Like,
that reminds me of what my mom does. Like, get Monica Boy, my mom, catch her for 5 minutes, she'll tell you her life story, and then she'll bust out new stuff. So like, I'm at a party for Rice Paper Scissors. There's a group of my friends like listening to her go. Once you get her started, she just goes, and she's like, yeah. And then I like overheard her saying, or actually my business partner came up to me. She's like, your mom said she smeared shrimp paste on herself when she was on the boat to escape Vietnam to deter people from violating her.
Wow.
And she just like nonchalantly threw that out at a party, and all of us are like,
Amazing. Damn, Monica.
yeah.
Well, she's like anti-perfume. I just need some shrimp.
Yeah, you want the major anti-perfume all over you in that situation.
What about you, Bonnie? Have you heard things that have surprised you about your family history?
Yeah, I mean, just for sure. I remember going to my cousin's wedding. You know, this was, oh gosh, like 10 years ago, and my grandmother was so happy. And I asked her about her wedding day, and she said, well, you know, I was really scared. I was super young. They put me in the thing and they carried me across the village, and I had only really seen him and met him like once, and I was scared, but you know, everyone said your gung gung was really nice, so I just hope for the best. Yeah, they were married for like 75 years, more than 75 years, and just to, you know, she was super matter of fact about it, but also like, you know, she was proud of it, you know. She and I, and you know, and my mom and aunts and my uncle, like they didn't know any of that, so they were just like, what, you know, how did that, you know, arranged marriage, you know, all that, but they didn't think to ask until I asked, you know, to find out. So I just love that you can really unlock all of that. Yeah, I just it's, I really like, I think about also that, especially with seniors, that not many people are asking them about their lives or their pasts, and I think that probably a stranger approaching them on the street, they may be like, oh, what do you want to know that for? Or, but then once they start talking, they realize like what you are doing. I think it must be, at least for the people who take the time to stop and talk with you, that it is probably a super, you know, an honor for them to feel part of this project. I mean, when you've had the shows and you've invited the subjects to be, you know, to see themselves on the wall, what did they say?
I think our first show was really special.
Yeah.
I remember that day where they're hanging the frames and like making sure it was level, and you know,
Yeah.
Buck Chu came through before opening, you know, with his like white gloves and his tie. We just, you know, got to see himself in context.
Yeah. I wish I had some photos of, I mean, we took some phone photos of him standing next to these portraits, and the portraits were kind of bigger than life size, actually. They were probably 48 inches tall or something. So
Wow.
yeah, we have these great phone photos and of them standing next to the portrait. And actually this is when that opening night was when we took this portrait of Monta, our cover girl. And yeah, they were hanging out. Some of them were drinking beer.
Someone was drinking OB beer.
OB beer.
Woo!
Yeah, and yeah, just kind of enjoying the energy. And most of them left pretty early. So that's why we made the opening. We started at like 4 p.m. so
they're like late night, 5 o'clock, gotta go.
But yeah, that was so amazing to see them there, kind of enjoying the energy and people, and to see other people admiring them.
Yeah,
Right.
that was a special night. But I mean, most of the time we're trying to sell them on the idea that they are special and their stories are important, and that like, please, pull, let us take a picture, and like tell us your story is amazing, you are amazing. But you know, most of the time it's like, no, this, like they're wearing it because of their social economic situation. They're not necessarily thinking like they look rad. So most of the time it's us trying to emphasize that, hey, you are interesting, or trying to document your story because it's important.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of compliment bombing.
Yes.
Persuading them that yes, it is important, and we earnestly do want to know about you. And I think sometimes we do notice they are very willing to talk about it once you kind of can get
break
past
the seal.
break the seal, exactly.
Yeah.
Then there is a lot of them that just will go on and on, actually, and are just willing to talk.
You have spotlighted a few of your favorites, obviously. It's controversial to pick favorites, but who were a few more of your favorite seniors? Show us.
I don't know if I have pictures of them, actually. I didn't prepare them, but I mean, Helen was, just to scroll back,
God,
Helen.
those glasses.
Yeah, they're pretty amazing. And my grandma used to wear similar glasses, so I think for me that was so nice.
Very Audrey Hepburn, I think.
Yeah, she's wearing like a lanyard with happy faces on
Smiley
it.
faces.
And she just had this like great patterned t-shirt too, but just the encounter was just kind of magical and fleeting, and I think about her still. I'm like, what is Helen doing? And yeah.
It was nice to capture my maternal grandmother.
Oh, yes.
She's
very elegant.
You know, I think after Andrea took this picture, I realized we dressed kind of the same. We're both kind of like tomboy. So that was a aha moment for me.
Yeah.
Another favorite is this person. She did not give us her name. Are you able to see her okay?
Yeah.
But she paired like kind of a lilac vest and shirt with a burgundy hat. And I swear you could swap this out with like a 30-year-old in Manhattan and it would be like it is the hippest thing ever, but it just looked so like young and old can wear it.
Right.
But I think she relented after Andrea ran into her enough times. She was like, okay,
yeah,
you can take my photo.
I'm like, fine. But she like wouldn't move. It was like she was like in the middle of the street. I was like, I guess this is where
I guess we're standing here.
It happens a lot where you're just like, oh, okay, like you're gonna agree to a photo and you just have to take a picture before they change their mind. Yeah. I think to go back to a question you asked earlier, another surprising thing for me was sort of the friendships and the relationships we developed. So Dorothy Kwok comes to mind. Has a multi-page spread in the book.
Yeah, she is amazing.
Yeah,
can you stop the screen share so maybe we can show some of the pictures a little bigger?
Oh yeah.
From the book, because then when you show that, then I think everyone will be able to see it.
This is Dorothy in the alleyway that we're in right now on Waverly, wearing
elegant
knit dresses that her sister Farn would knit.
It's just, I love her style, and I just love how her posture is too, like how she holds herself like very fashion model, I think. So one of the questions I had is, of this particular time, Chinatowns have been especially so hard hit in pandemic, and a lot of, businesses, catastrophically so, a lot of businesses have closed, especially restaurants, but other businesses too, because Chinatown depends, as you know, so much on foot traffic. And I love that you have been representing by trying to zoom in from, places in Chinatown whenever you can, all over the place. And, another thing that I have read about is that the Asian American community in San Francisco specifically has been hit hard by COVID fatalities as well. And I'm wondering what if you've been in close contact with your subjects and what you've heard from their lives right now, is there some sense that you're getting, sort of in this time, maybe you've gotten back in touch with people you've come to be close with now that the book has come out, to kind of check in and see where they are or send them a book. What have you heard from them, if anything, or any trends that you're kind of seeing?
Like how they're spending their time or how they're doing?
Yeah.
Dorothy's probably the only person I've seen. I drop off groceries for. She loves Rainbow Grocery, so shout out to Rainbow. Bulk bins are now open again. We're happy to report. But yeah, I see her when I drop off stuff, and she'll be joining us for some talks coming up. But yeah, she was just indoors.
Yeah.
Just indoors. But I think she's starting to like go on little field trips here and there.
But she also had like a pretty intensive exercise routine she would do. So that gave me some peace of mind knowing that she's still moving, exercising, and not just wasting away indoors either. She tries to get vitamin D by sitting by the window for breakfast. Like she's very regimented with her routine, at least.
Yeah.
She's joining in for Zoom talks. She knows the Zoom. So she works as a researcher for a lot of Chinatown kind of projects. So she's keeping busy that way as well.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I think if you're able to get outside, and of course, a lot of seniors in Chinatown, and specifically in San Francisco, Chinatown, they're hanging out in Portsmouth Square, and that's the living room, and but just to be outside is such a big thing, and of course, um, if you're trapped inside, it's a smaller, it's such a, most people live in very small quarters, and that is just like a tough, again, for such a vulnerable population, I think, right now. And I just was curious if you had a sense of how their routines have changed, but it sounds like people are still trying to keep up with being outside as much as possible.
People are definitely shopping still.
Yeah.
Yeah, people are out and about. There were quite a few programs to help make meals and deliver them to
Right.
people in SROs and elderly, I think, to minimize, at least for the first few months. I'm not sure if they're ongoing. But I did some research this morning. I was looking at kind of the data in Chinatowns in at least Oakland and San Francisco, and I was happy to see that despite kind of the density, especially in San Francisco, that the rate, COVID rate was pretty low actually in the neighborhood. And that maybe is a testament to just the mask wearing, which has been a part
Right.
of culture for a lot longer and has been normalized. And really everybody in Chinatown and San Francisco, people are good about it. But everyone in Chinatown has been wearing a mask. And
it now adds like another interesting layer of clothing.
a lot of handmade masks too, a lot of
Oh
patterns.
yeah, I'm sure they're really.
Some more accessory.
Yeah. What can I add? What more patterns can I add to this whole thing? I'm going to turn to some of that we have some questions that people have put in. I'm going to ask them on their behalf. One is, what was the process like for approaching people, and how did you describe your project to them? Also, if you feel comfortable, I'd love to learn about your follow-up and what forms of compensation, reciprocation you all engaged with.
Yeah, so approaching people is a bit of a dance. So we go out to the streets of Chinatown, and luckily we did this whole project pre-COVID. So we probably wrapped up shooting like a year ago. But yeah, this is like a collection of 6 years worth of like serendipitous, street encounters. So yeah, when we see someone that we're interested in speaking to, we will try to approach them just by saying, hi, how you doing? And usually complimenting a certain item, whether it's like their hat or their shoes. And then from there, we try to engage in like a natural conversation, like, what are you up to? What are you doing? And then it would evolve naturally. And eventually we would be like, hey, we're doing this project. We are documenting the lives of seniors in Chinatowns. We love your style. We love your story. Can we take a photo of you? And it's really important for us to get them on board for the project.
Right.
So it's not just like photos from far away. It's like them, smiling and
acknowledging the camera a lot of times. And yeah, it is street style that we're capturing, but I think we're kind of differentiated because it's they are more like portraits in a way. And afterwards, I'll get prints made of everyone that we photograph, and we'll send them directly to them. So as a thank you, and I think for them it's like very special to have like a professionally photographed print, and sometimes they'll write or call us, and just out of appreciation, which is really sweet. And
Bakchi used to carry around the photo you took of him, right?
yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He always had on his person, he always had one of those like mini photo album binders
From the 90s, like
Yeah.
the thin plastic sleeves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
he
he had
carried
photos
it
from
around
when
with
he was younger and of his family, and he would, point out how proud he was of his engineer sons.
Yeah,
and
he's like, this is my waifu, and then he's like, this is my engineer.
very proud, very
Yeah.
proud. And then when we encounter him later, I saw that he would include the photos I took as part of the album, and that just made me so
great.
happy that it became a part of his story too. Yeah.
That is, I mean, like I said, I think it's a real gift.
Yeah, in terms of follow-up, we do send them a print, and then with this book, we're donating our bookshop.org sales, affiliate sales, to Chinatown nonprofits. So each month we focus on a different nonprofit.
That's really wonderful. Joe asks, did the book start out as a photo exhibition in San Francisco's Chinatown? I missed that, sadly, and wonder how you might have incorporated the stories in that format.
The project started out as a one-off article for the Bold Italic. So it was called the Chinatown Sartorial List, and we did it in 2014. And then I think probably a year or so passed. And then the Chinatown Community Development Center, which is a nonprofit here that does affordable housing and just represents a lot of the residents, they reached out to us about using their space, 41 Ross, to do a photo show. And then we just did really giant portraits and had little cards, wall tags with their stories.
So we photographed a lot of new people and talked to more people for the photo show. I wonder if that Chinatown Sartorialist story is still up from 2014.
I think it's still up. But yeah, it
Yeah,
evolved
I might be able to find
naturally
it.
from a one-off story to a photo show, which inspired the Instagram and the blog.
Yeah.
And then 6 years later, we have this book.
Yeah. I mean, it must feel so special to have this object, you know, this tangible object. 6 years is a long time, and to be able to have it all together. I guess one of the questions that I had actually was, is this the end of the project? I mean, do you see this continuing in some way beyond now?
I think it's a good way to encapsulate the project. And I feel so lucky that we did it when we did and for how long that we did.
Right.
Because now we're living in a time where it's a lot more difficult to, you know, approach a senior in the street and interact with them. So I think for now we're just like celebrating the launch of this book and, you know, getting people's feedback and kind of just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Being in that space.
Yeah.
Enjoying it. You
Yeah,
should.
yeah. People are like, what's next? I'm like, enjoying it in all the different ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
Faithy says, I love this series so much. Thank you, Valerie and Andrea, for bringing this to the world. Much of the beauty you both highlighted is definitely from the connection you've built with the subjects and your collective artistic eye. What was the awareness level of the subjects that they are stylish, and how intentional are they with their touches of style? You touched on this a little bit, but if you want to say a little bit more about it.
There's a range. There's definitely a range, and you'll see that in the book that some of the clothes are very intentional, very color coordinated. Like I'll bring up the one. He is just quite a character on his own in San Francisco. You know, outside of Chinatown, we have friends that spot him on the street in the Mission or on the bus, and he often wears like a red suit or a yellow suit and has all these like handmade bolo ties and jewelry. And so he's very intentional. But as Valerie mentioned, a lot of times they're just like,
This whole thing?
yeah. Like,
No.
Or like, no, this is not my good shirt.
They're like, this is old, I'm old. I'm like, yes, those things may be true, but they look amazing. And there's thought and there's like so much humor and joy and surprises in that. Like that froggy pinky ring.
Yeah.
My favorite Sallad's wine wore, like that kills me every time. I'm like.
I mean, yeah, you don't just like, you know, that ring doesn't just appear on your finger. You put it on. So there is that humor and playfulness that is just, you know, that says something about that person who would do that, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we don't know if she knows that her socks say, my favorite salad is wine. No, but I like to think that she might, it's like a wink.
Yeah,
for sure. Catherine says, your marvelous photos and stories suggest that there's a cultural phenomenon around elder fashion that is shared across many cities. In Taiwan, the laundromat owners at Wanshou Laundry, who model the clothes left behind by customers, has also been a huge internet hit. And she asked, do these images suggest a renewed appreciation of our elders?
I think so. I think with our project, that Instagram and projects like Advanced Style, I think with like Instagram and the internet, there's just so many different ways to share it.
Yeah. And that it's like, right, that it is, it's image, it can be celebrating that image and have a single powerful image be really compelling, you know, that it's not just, again, like, not that a magazine or newspaper piece or a book would be different, but I think, again, with like something like Instagram where you're seeing just, it's like you got to see that person on the street, right? And that's like the thrill and the fun and the that spontaneity and that kind of like serendipity that we talked about is like it's almost like that happened, but online, sort of thing.
I'm not sure too if it's maybe a renewed appreciation so much as a higher visibility. I think these projects, maybe they hadn't been done before. They just weren't as visible. I think as accessible, right? And with Instagram, and that's definitely made it more accessible.
And in terms of elder fashion, I think what I've noticed doing this project is that it's like cross-cultural, right? You go to Vietnam, it'd be like Saigon, pretty.
Yeah.
Go to India
Russia.
and see how the elders are wearing their clothes, and it melted my mind.
I see a series coming up. Jerry asks, how did you structure and organize the book and decide which subjects to include? Were there lost photos that failed to make the final printing? Ooh, that's a good question.
Well, the book is organized by city. So we went to 6 cities, 2 in the Bay Area, SF and Oakland, and then Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, Vancouver. So each chapter has a bit of backstory on that particular Chinatown, and then goes into the profiles and pictures. And oh my gosh, there's so many.
There's so many
a lot
people.
Of lost photos.
The outtakes.
Yeah. And it was important to us to have people that, we have waivers for, like that sign the consent form, that's a part of it. Also bringing in stories too, like certain type of stories.
Right.
And then there was one point where we like printed out all the photos and the stories and like laid them out in Andria's studio. And that was an interesting exercise. Just like, how do we order these stories? There's some that are really intense. There's some that are lighter. So how do we kind of like have it flow together as well?
Right. Like not just the visual flow, but the narrative flow through. Yeah,
absolutely. And it really helped to have the physical copies to like move around, and we wanted to make sure the flow was working. So there are photos that didn't make the book, but there's also just people that we met that declined a photo, and in my mind they're lost photos because I remember them so clearly. And we call them unicorns. Ones that got away.
We're haunted by them.
Sometimes if you keep running into them, sometimes you can get them to reconsider, but those in my mind are also lost photos.
Well, I think about this because you write about this in the book, where you would encounter them again and again, and they would be in a different mood or wearing something different and be more chatty, and it's like, if you miss them the first time, there's always the chance that you will see them again, or maybe you won't. Like maybe it will be like that, that woman who went on her once a week walk while you were there, and that was it. But you did get to, you went like this.
Yeah.
She's like flying into the night. It's just like, it's kind of romantic, I think.
Yeah.
We have one more question, which is, I think, perfect timing. Actually, 2 more questions. Did you encounter any language difficulties? And if so, how did you address that in order to communicate with different people?
Yes. So language barrier is probably the biggest barrier. Most people in Chinatowns speak Cantonese or Toisan, and neither of us speak that. So we rely on an interpreter. And so it's usually 3 of us that are going out and chatting with people. But I rely a lot on like super enthusiastic thumbs up. Smiles, a lot of like pleading, and our catchphrase, which is "Popo Holang," which is grandma.
I mean, I'm telling you, I know that got you far.
Yeah.
Our pickup line.
Last question, and I think this is the perfect one to end on, is what did you learn about the phenomenon of aging from this project, and what wisdom? It's a really great question.
Yeah. I learned, I think, what I aspire to be like when I'm older, or how I aspire to age. There are people like meeting and interviewing and hanging out with people like Dorothy Kwok. I think seeing how independent she is, how active she is. She's very, she probably has like 3 jobs, or at least 2 jobs at historian. And she's also a tour for Walk With Chinatown tours. So she leads walking tours. And yeah, she's just so active, very informed. She's an activist, and she's constantly learning. She takes like
Computer
classes at the local YWCA. And she intentionally tries to eat very healthy and exercise, do Tai Chi. And that is a huge inspiration for me. I mean, I would love to be able to even manage that now in my life, but I think seeing how she handles that and and with such grace, that's something I aspire to.
And for me, like my grandma, my maternal grandmother, she lives in Sunnyvale. Like I grew up in the suburbs, and like she was just at home. She took care of us, which is great. But being in Chinatown, it's laid out in a way that you could be 89 and walk down the stairs and like hang out with your friends in the park or take laps around and get your groceries. And so it's like the ultimate urban living.
Yeah.
I really appreciate how active they are, and that's something I take away. Also, their excellent posture too.
Yes, I noticed that in almost every photograph. People were just like,
yeah, I'm very proud. Yeah.
And then I look at myself, what am I doing?
It's always a reminder to straighten up.
Thank you so much. This was so delightful. Thank you for making this book and bringing it into the world to share with all of us. I mean,
and thank you for making your book. You're, definitely one of our sources for the book. Shout out in the back.
Such an honor. I love it. It makes me happy.
For being as enthusiastic about Chinatown and for educating us about it.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I think the one last note, of course, before we turn it back over to Casey is thank you all for being with us. Please support our bookstores, Green Apple, all of our independent booksellers. We love so much, and they do so much for our communities and bring you wonderful author events like this. And so buy books, buy from Green Apple, buy from your favorite local indies. And thanks so much for hosting us, Green Apple.
Thank you. Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you so much for that discussion. It was wonderful. Thank you to everyone who joined and asked questions. And also, again, we have copies of this book, so please buy it on our website or in our stores. And I think that wraps it up. Thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you and good night.
Thanks for having us.
Joaquin, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, Bonnie.